Okay, today we're looking at part 2 of the lesson, 4-2. We're going to look at how to solve for or come up with the slope-intercept form given a table this time. So y is equal to mx plus b is our slope-intercept form, just like we did in the previous lesson with a graph, but in this time we're given a table. So we still need to find those two missing links here, which is our slope and our y-intercept. Okay, so if you remember last week how we found the slope from a table, we took 2 points, and these are linear equations, so whether it's proportional or not, and obviously we could see that we don't have a 0, 0, so it's not proportional. But we can just take 2 points from this table and solve for the slope. So I'm going to go ahead and take 0, 1 and 2, 7. Okay, and if you recall what we did last week, x1, y1 and x2, y2. I'm going to draw my lines and find the slope. 7 minus 1 over 2 minus 0, and that's 6 over 2, which is equal to 3. So my slope here is 3. Now, with this type of table, there's other ways of deriving the slope, but we'll just stick with what we know for now. The next thing I'd like you to recognize is how to solve for b in the table. And in this case, we know that the b is our y-intercept, is where the line crosses the y-axis. And we learned from the previous lesson when we graphed that where x is 0, that y is your y-intercept. And we can see that here. We have it as 0 in this table. And sometimes the tables will not have the corresponding y values for the 0 value for x. So in this table we do. So whenever x is 0, which we have here, our y is equal to b. You see that? So b is equal to 1. And there you have it. Now we have our slope, we have our y-intercept, and we can come up with the equation of this line. I'll just write it in black. Y is equal to, and remember the slope is 3, right? So 3 times x plus, and then our y-intercept is 1, and we'll write 1 there. Okay? We have to write the 1 there. Don't confuse this with the slope that's 1, that you don't need to write it down. So if your y-intercept is 1, you write 1 for sure. Okay? So y is equal to 3x plus 1 is the equation that corresponds to this table. Go ahead and do this one yourself and see what you come up with. Remember, you want this in slope-intercept form. Y is equal to mx plus b. And you want to solve for the slope and the y-intercept. And we'll come back to it after you're done. Okay, so on number 2, I did something a little different for finding the slope. Notice that every point here on the y-axis is increasing by 20, and every point on the x-axis is decreasing by 5. Or it just depends on how you're looking at it. You could go from this way, going to the right and looking at 0 to 5 increasing by 5, and 140 to 120 decreasing by 20. The reason why I like to go towards the 0 is that sometimes you need to come up with the y-intercept yourself, so it's always better to kind of draw your arrows towards where x becomes 0 in order to find your y-intercept, and you'll see that on the next example. So what I did was I looked at the change in y over the change in x, and we could see that every change in y is consistently plus 20. So you're adding 20 each time from 60 to 80 to 100, 120 and 140 and so on. And the change in x is decreasing by 5. So 20 to 15, decrease by 5. 15 to 10, decrease by 5. And 5, 0, and so on. And so I also wrote this out the same way that we did the first slope with the problem number 1 by picking 2 points and solving for slope, and you'll still get negative 4. So either way, if you solve this, you'll get negative 4 for the slope here or here, which comes out to be negative 4. Great. And the y-intercept, once again, hopefully you remembered that whenever x is 0, your y-intercept is the y value that corresponds to x being 0. So now we have our y-intercept, we have the slope, and we can put it into the formula, which is y is equal to mx plus b. Negative 4 is the slope, and the y-intercept is 140. It kind of took a lot of room here because I showed you both ways of solving for slope with a table. So if you decide that you don't want to do this technique, that's fine. We're just going to need it for the next example, but you could use the points as well to find the slope. So again, you could use 5, 120, and 10, 100, or any of the other points. This is a linear equation. It comes out to be a linear equation, so you will be fine to do that. Okay, let's look at the next example here, number 3. On this one, you do not know what the value, the corresponding value for y is when x is 0, because x is not given to you. 0 is not given to you. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at how the y's are changing and how the x's are changing and kind of working backwards. So we can see that the x's are, you see, decreasing by 1, right? So every x of 4 goes to 3, 3 goes to 2, it's decreasing by 1 each time, right? And so if I subtract 1 from 1, I'll get 0, which is what I want. I want my x to be 0 because I want to find what my y-intercept is. I can figure out what my slope is, but my y-intercept is kind of missing in this table. And then I do the same thing, look at how the y is changing, and 145 to 115, and that is subtracting 30. So it's going down by 30. And 115 to 85, again, it's decreasing by 30. And 85 to 55 is decreasing by 30. So then, continuing this pattern, I'm going to take 55 and subtract it by 30, and I'll get 25. Okay, so I'm going to continue that pattern. And with that, I will be able to identify my y-intercept, because now when my x is 0, the y value is my b. So now I know what b is. B is 25. And my slope here, if I want to use this technique, the change in y over change in x, I notice that the change of y is negative 30 and the change in x is negative 1. So I can write negative 30 over negative 1, which is the change in y over the change in x. And that's negative 30 over negative 1, which is equal to positive 30. Let's squeeze that in right there. Right there. Now, once again, if you wanted to, you could totally take 2 points from this table and calculate it, and you will get the same answer. So 30 will be my slope, and then I go ahead and put that into the formula, which is our equation y is equal to mx plus b, m times x plus b, and I have my slope and my y-intercept. So y is equal to, slope is 30 times x plus 25 is my b. And there we have it. Final answer. A lot of work. Okay, but you know, it will get you there. Okay. Okay, so carpet cleaning costs are shown in the table below. Find and interpret the rate of change. The rate of change is the same as the slope. And the initial value, when you hear the initial value, that is the y-intercept. That is where your line or your data begins. And that initial value is always your b, which is your y-intercept. And of course, the rate of change is the slope. We want to know what this means in terms of the cost per each room that is getting cleaned. Go ahead and solve for b and the y-intercept and the slope here, and we'll come back to interpreting this information. I'll give you some time to do that. Okay, so here we are. I'm showing you here, we're showing you here how the increments of the change in y is happening. So 275 to 225 is decreasing by 50. 225 to 175 is again decreasing by 50, and so on. So in order for us to be able to find out what the y-intercept is, we need the x, which is the number of rooms that are getting cleaned, to be 0. And that's our initial cost. So for 0 rooms, how much does it cost? So that initial fee, if they're coming in to clean the carpets, they're going to charge $75 for just coming in. And that's how we're calculating it, by going kind of backwards here to see, okay, at 0, when x is 0, what is y? And so at the end here, we're taking 125 and subtracting by 50, and we're getting 75. As we are looking at the x values here, every time we are decreasing by increments of 1. So 75 is the initial value, initial cost or of this situation. And then the slope, I went ahead and just used the other technique that I showed you before, which the change in y over change in x, and we can see that the change in y each time occurs at -50, and the change in x at -1, and so -50 over -1 is +50. So when we put this into the slope-intercept form, y is equal to 50x plus 75, now you're looking at the application part of this equation, where the initial fee for a carpet cleaning is $75, and then each room costs $50. So every time they want to clean a room, they'll charge $50 for it, but the initial fee where they come in and set up and all that is $75. So if they don't clean anything, and they'll just charge you $75 and not clean any rooms. They clean 2 rooms, it'll be 2 times 50 plus 75, and so on. So as you can see, that is also shown in the table. Well, we'll go back to this later on, and in fact, we're actually having a problem. And the next problem that we have, does have to do with you substituting a number in for x, which is your input. So let's go ahead and look at that problem here. The total cost for parking and boat rental are shown in the table below. So this is the total cost for parking and renting a boat. What is the cost for parking? So we're looking here to see, okay, the number of hours you're renting a boat, the total cost is y, and the number of hours is x. And we don't have a y-intercept, so we got to find that. That's probably our cost for parking. So go ahead and see if you can figure out the y-intercept and the slope, and then we can go and answer part A and B with that information. I'll give you some time to do that on your own. Okay, so hopefully by now you've seen that the y values are decreasing. You could either look at it as increasing by 12 or decreasing by 12 so that you can get to the y-intercept, which we want because we want to know what our initial cost is. And that is when x is 0. So as you can see, the x values are decreasing by 1 and the y values are decreasing by 12. So at the end here, when you take 17 and subtract it from 12, you'll get 5. So when x is 0, y is 5, and that is going to give us our y-intercept. And of course, the change in y over the change in x will give you your slope, which comes out to be negative 12 over negative 1 is positive 12. Okay, so what does this mean? If we're looking at the total cost of the boat rental and parking, when we know that the initial fee is $5, you have not paid for any hours, like you haven't been there for any amount of time, that means that you're paying $5 for parking. So this is a parking fee. And you'll, when you're looking at a word problem, you need to be able to understand what that initial fee would mean with respect to that problem. So with parking fee being $5, and that's our initial value, which is $5, how much would it cost to rent a boat for 3.5 hours? Well, our equation, which is y is equal to mx plus b, we can substitute b in for 5, or 5n for b, sorry, and 12 is the slope, and 12 here is the cost, right? So what 12 means is this is the cost per hour for renting a boat. So if I wanted to rent a boat for 1 hour, I would have to pay $12 plus $5, and that would give me 17. I would have to pay $17. That's where the 17 is coming from. So this 12 is $12 per hour for renting a boat, and that's your rate of change. So when you're seeing the slope, now you kind of understand, hopefully, the meaning of what the slope is with respect to a problem. So if I wanted to rent the boat for 3.5 hours, the number of hours, as you could see, is my x value. So be careful, recognize that your hours is your x values. So that's your number of hours, and you substitute 3.5 hours in for x, and then you'll figure out what the cost is. And the cost would be what your y is. So this y here is the cost. I'll bring this down a little bit for you to see it. The y is the cost, the total cost, and the x is the number of hours. Okay, hours. Okay, that you're renting the boat. So $5 is, at this point, we realize that that's your parking fee. And of course, 12 is the amount of money you're spending per hour for renting the boat. So that's your boat rental. Boat rental. So each one of these numbers and variables mean something. So if I wanted to know to answer this question, 3.5 hours, I know that my hours is my x. So I'm going to substitute 3.5 in for x in my equation right here and solve for the total cost. So here I go with y is equal to 12 is my rate of change. That's how much each hour of renting a boat costs, times 3.5, which is my x value, and that's given to us, plus 5. And this will give me the total cost of renting a boat for 3.5 hours. And when I solve for that, 12 times 3.5 gives me 42 plus 5 is $47. So it will cost $47 to rent a boat for 3.5 hours. There you have it. Hopefully this was helpful, and we'll be doing more problems similar to this next week as well. Have a lovely day.